All
I'm
right,
just enjoying
perfect,
it.
because I'm on this.
I'm
All
enjoying
right.
it.
I know, Skylar, you're freaking awesome, and that's really one of the things that I was gonna ask. What was your childhood like, and like, how did you get to be just chill and fall into this niche? Were you always a gamer, or like was gaming an escape for you? And share as much or as little as you care to.
Yeah, I mean, for me, video games were definitely an escape. I grew up in a kind of a rough situation,
Hmm.
drugs and all that kind of stuff. And
Hmm.
yeah, I used to make this joke with people. I'd be like, if it weren't for video games, I'd be a drug addict kind of deal.
I'm pretty sure
It's
a
just
lot
because
of people
there's
would
no
be. It's kind of
right, right. I mean,
yeah,
because you're one, people are just bored out of their skulls with how I don't know how people did it in
exactly.
the 1800s. It's
Yeah,
like what the hell else do you do?
that
No
dopamine.
no wonder when they did the prohibition, they went mad and they brought it back. They
Yeah,
were okay, we can
they're
have alcohol.
just bored out
Like
of their
these people are
minds.
way too crazy. Yeah, exactly. So, um, yeah, I have always, I started on Sega Genesis personally, playing Sonic 2. It was one of
Hmm.
those things I was able to get when I was younger, and unfortunately didn't have access to a lot of video game consoles growing up, but I played the heck out of that. Played stuff when I went to friends' houses. Obviously was exposed to Mario. Pokemon was huge for me.
Hmm.
I mean, I still play the crap out of Pokemon. I remember I being in high school and I had this choir class I was in, and become some of like the more popular kids. At my school, if you were in theater and you did call or and you did like choir and music and stuff like that, you were actually seen as more than like one of the jocks, than you were not. Like like other
Wow.
schools, you think like, oh, band kids, like you're kind of nerds and stuff. No, not in my school. My school, it was like that was the thing to be. It was like a thespian. Like you wanted that. And I remember being in the choir class and all the cool kids, these thespian nerds in their own right, sitting at the back of the room, they're playing Pokemon on their Game Boys. And I remember that just kind of was a thing. It was like if you played Pokemon when you were at least I graduated in '09. Um,
Hmm.
at that day and age, it was like you were, yeah, you were a closet nerd, but that was kind of a cool thing to be. And so, I mean, I don't know if that's a common experience, but I think a lot of people, once with the advancements with YouTube and Discord now, and just people can just connect on video games at so many different levels. It's really the way that people bridge different worlds together. Because
Hmm.
we all have video games at some point in
Hmm.
some way growing up, and our parents didn't necessarily have, and some of them became, let's say, obsessed with it when they got into their adult years and had the money they can spend on stuff, and they got those
Yeah.
Ataris and they got those Nintendos and all that stuff. Um, but us, like we are the beneficiaries of those weird obsessions, or at the very least, our parents being like, "Well, here's a thing to keep you preoccupied," right? But I
Yeah.
was telling my wife, I was like, with our kids, it's going to be different. It's going to be different because I'm going to get a game console, and I'm going to be like, okay, it's my console, and you're allowed to use it, but you do anything to it, you're buying me a new one kind of deal. Like, and for Christmas, like I'll be buying them a Switch and me a Switch kind of deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
there's no, it's a totally different thing. Like parents aren't buying stuff for their kids; they're buying stuff with their kids. They're playing games with
Mm.
their kids now. Pokemon is not a kids game. Pokemon is a family game, and I think that's becoming more and more apparent in our society as time is going on. I mean, Twitch is just taking off, and we got what, millionaires now, like multimillionaires,
Dude.
maybe. Like you think about PewDiePie and what
Or
he's brought to the
Ninja.
table. Yeah, yeah,
Ninja's a
Ninja is a great
huge one.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See,
or Markiplier is a huge one. I mean,
Yeah, dude.
and you could go into so many different like genres too. I mean, you got platformers, you got your uh, animation, you got your JRPGs, you got your horror genre games. Like
Yeah.
horror is like my personal favorite, and that's
yeah.
expanding huge. It's
And GTA's
I,
been popping off really like the last 2 years
uh,
too.
Can I just
I don't
say
even know what that's gonna look like.
I can't even imagine how fucking scary randomized Resident Evil would be. Like running back through Resident Evil 4
Yeah,
thinking you know what the fuck is going on. Dude, I would lose it.
I used to play this
I,
game on PlayStation 2 called Fear.
it's actually a thing now too, like randomized. Oh, here's
Yeah, Fear was a crazy
great.
game, dude.
Yeah, it's like a first-person shooter horror game. It's actually
Yeah.
one of its like the first of its
Mhm.
kind, and because whereas like Resident Evil, it's more like over the shoulder, right? And you're like
Yeah.
trying to unlock different parts as you go. Like Fear is very much just like a straight shooter,
It's
but
terrifying.
it's got horror elements to it. Oh yeah, it's very scary.
Dude,
At least for the time, I remember having the piss scared out of me. So
I was playing
Yeah.
that at like 10 years old. That was so terrifying.
Yeah, see, and it's
yeah,
so funny that I feel like everyone has a certain level of gamer in them. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think like
Even if they don't want to admit it.
Dude, there's
yeah,
a game for everybody. No, they just haven't found it yet.
yeah, and like I
Totally.
want hold on. What have you seen through COVID? Like give me your assessment of video games and the influence on COVID and culture. I want to hear this cuz this
Well,
is
it turns out if you don't want if you tell people they can't interact with each other, then the prices of video games triple. Apparently, that's the case because it's what we call the COVID spike or the COVID
Mhm.
tax. Because everything in the store right now is just inflated well beyond the price. Now it's starting to crash and go back down, um, as it will. But it's like at the beginning of COVID, everyone's like, "Well, I'm going to be stuck indoors. I'm going to get me some Conker's Bad Fur Day and have a good time." You know, everybody had the same thought. And it didn't help that there were a handful of YouTubers that were like, "It's happening. This is your break to play these video games and get caught up." And they told everyone to go out and do this. And so there is kind of an artificial inflation of price due to COVID. But yeah, I got some. It was interesting because I ended up finding that I still wanted to play the exact same games in quarantine
Mm.
that I had played before, and now I'm playing more or less as things have been dying down. So
Do you mean for nostalgia purposes? Like going back to a game like for me, I remember playing the original like Harvest Moon or like The Sims, like herbs and shit like that. Like when I was little, there were certain
yeah,
games or there was hold on. It was Sonic Adventure 2 Battle that had the Chow Garden. Like there's some
yep, that was
nostalgia.
on the GameCube.
Yeah. So were you going to nostalgia games or just you mean like how did I don't know how to phrase this question right.
I'll say a lot of Animal Crossing, a lot of Pokemon, and a lot of Zelda. And so yeah, straight up Nintendo, a lot of that for me. Um, I kept wanting to. I had a huge desire to want to do a Link party with Halo. Um, we were like, we have all this time off, let's hang out with each other. So we were like a group of like 12 people that were all like, well, we're all kind of quarantining together in our own houses. Like we're not seeing anybody else, we're not doing our own thing. We're stopping the spread, but with each other. You know what I mean? Like in our own little
Mhm.
community that we created. Yeah, I mean, we would when Animal Crossing New Horizons came out. I think collectively, everyone in my group put in 200, 300 hours a piece. And so that, between like the 8 of us that were playing that, we probably have 2 weeks straight of gameplay. Like if we just played start to finish, no sleep, no food, no nothing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I think it just allowed me to have an opportunity to really hone in on some of the particulars of video games that I loved.